Hey there, founders. Welcome. I am excited to have this conversation about building your startup in terms of a software MVP, launching your product, and what founders struggle all the time when it comes to building the software, building their MVP, figuring out, okay, especially if you're not technical, even if you are technical, you're going to have lots of great insights about what to do here. The challenge that I see founders run into all the time is they know they have to be building a software and they do all the wrong things for the right reasons and end up wasting a whole ton of money. And it's crazy making because you're just making mistake after mistake because there's a process that all great startups go through when it comes to launching their startup. I have here John Rush, founder and CEO of Mars, and the value proposition, the message is right there clear. You've never built a startup this fast before, and we're going to talk about this solution. Mars is a revolutionary all-in-one technology that allows anybody, all of you, to get complex solutions done 10 times faster with zero limitation on scalability and compatibility. That's a big promise. It's all in one, reuse and adapt, built on itself. And here's a quote from a founder, said, according to our estimations, using Mars saved us 5,760 hours yearly for our designers and engineers. That's worth $144,000 per year. So many founders out there, that's what they've got. I've talked to founders that have sunk in $150,000 of their own money, retirement, savings, lines of credit, credit cards, remortgage their house, all different things like that, to end up with a product that either has gone way too far in terms of scope, doesn't do what it's intended to do, maintenance cost, doesn't make any money, invalidated, people don't want it. And guess what? Now you're stuck. Once again, John is here. We're going to have a real, just straightforward, brutally honest conversation about his experience. And I'm going to talk and ask him questions from an advisory perspective that if you stick through, founders, all of you who are listening to this, if you're interested in building a software-based MVP, this conversation is going to be for you. John, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on this talk.
Great. How about you start off, give a little bit of your background and what qualifies you to even be here and have this conversation, your experience with startups and what you've done now, and then we can get into the advice for all the founders.
Yeah, so I've been into this world for maybe over 13 years now. And I graduated from computer science school, and I was CTO at the beginning. I joined a couple of startups in 2010 in Norway, where everything was just starting. Like there was no startup ecosystem, just started. And then I joined probably first 3 startups that happened here in Norway. And then at the beginning, I felt like everything in the startup is about how difficult is the problem and how good is the technology and how much time do you put into solving it. And I think that's what a lot of the people think, especially tech people. That's what I thought. And my first startups, I think I spent like enormous amount of time building software there. And I was pretty much surprised when I saw that there were not so many users. And that brought me to thinking that probably it's not that smart to go on to build software for a year with a team of people and only then go to the users and see if that works or not. So, and I did repeat that mistake many times. So basically for the first 4 or 5 years, I kept doing that, and I would say I kept failing with that. But I worked so hard that I would just work at the nights and weekends, and then we would get things done quickly. But still, we would spend a lot of time on building MVPs, and we would build everything from scratch every time. And then when I moved from startup to startup, I felt like I'm doing things all over again every time, and then things take time. And then I felt like something has to be different. Like, why am I doing the same things every year, almost over again? Right? And that was like my experience for the first 5 years in the startups. And then after building about maybe 10 projects for like smaller and bigger startups, I realized that I have to push founders to build something simpler, to build something faster, to use technologies that let you build things faster. Because like most founders come from the idea that from things they hear outside, and those things are usually broadcasted by the corporates, that things have to be scalable, things have to be very secure, things have to be, you have to think about everything. And then, well, that's a good idea, like, but what's the cost, right? And I remember the first project I've been into, we have spent 2 years building. We burned about $30,000, and that's a lot of money back then. And then only then we launched, and then we realized that a lot of things didn't work. We thought will work, right? And then in the later startups, in the 2015, when I joined the new startup, I said we have to build whatever we want to build in 1 month. If we can't build that in 1 month, it means we're doing something wrong. So we have to now scope down the MVP. We have to not focus on anything what's not important, and we have to find technology that only helps us to build fast. It's not important what's going to happen after a year if we have 1 million users suddenly coming to our servers. Like, if that happens, great, we're going to solve that problem somehow. But let's focus now on the problem that we have to spend a little money and launch MVP, and we have to iterate on that MVP, and we have to have money saved and left on our bank account that we can make 3 or 4 or 5 iterations, because that's when we're going to understand what has to be done.
And you're right. In our experience, the first MVP is usually wrong. Like, there's a whole set of assumptions that go out there, and you want to figure out whether it's going to be validated or invalidated. And typically the first set of assumptions are completely wrong. And that's what you're trying to solve. So instead of spending all the money building something from scratch and then building something that's not going to work, and then you've lost all that, you're saying, let's build it faster, cheaper, so that if there is an iteration, it's not as costly to then get to eventually something that is going to work, which is what you experience doing this over and over and over again. Because founders think that they have to start building from scratch, which today is just not the case. So how'd I do as far as summarizing your experience and what you're talking about now? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Then give me the pitch. So tell me now, I'm going to just prop something up here because I want founders who are watching this to see this. We've got, pricing free forever. You put this on your website, free forever for startups. Okay. And so $0. And then you obviously got a custom. From the perspective of, let's take 2 groups. One is the non-technical founder who says, okay, my MVP, I can't build it with, the no code solutions out there. It's just not going to do the functions that I want, which I recommend everybody. If you can build an MVP just using a website or, tools out there, WordPress, go for it. And that might be an interim step, but founders, non-technical ones, they have to build a software MVP with robust enough features to start testing, different things. And then talk about the founders who are technical and who have a team, but maybe don't have enough engineers, don't have enough resource to invest in that. What is the value proposition that you are proposing from Mars, and how are you giving it for free? Like, how does that work? Explain this to me.
I think it all comes from our mission. So our mission is that we want the software to be built in a way faster, and way cheaper, and we want that to be on scale, right? Like, if we want to be, the not the monopoly, but more like the default way of building startups. Like, I'm not talking about the corporates. I'm talking more about startups. We want to be the default there. Like people use Slack as a default for communication. We want Mars to be default for building a product. But then, we don't want to be the tool that people use and then eventually they grow out of it, because that's what happens with a lot of no-code tools, right? Because people put a lot of effort into building stuff, and as you know, everything was temporary becomes permanent, and then you don't want to rebuild your stuff right when things go well for you, right? Because you don't want that technical debt and things like that. So, and since we built Mars initially for ourselves, rather than as a product to sell. The main thing we focused there was that how can we combine no code and custom code in one place? Because like, so you don't have to choose. Like if you have a lot of money, probably a wise way for you to go with it is that you hire good team of engineers, experience, etc. And whatever they want to use, they should use because they will be happy with that, right? But in most cases, startups are not there. They don't have a lot of money. Even those who have investments in, it's not like a lot of money, right? And then in that case, or for the case where they have no money at all except some personal savings and little angel round, we think that Mars and other no-code tools are the best to start with. Like you mentioned, WordPress, like there's Bubble, there are a lot of stuff in the market, like hundreds of them. And I think it's really good way to start, but it will be very painful to realize at some point that you have to start over with a custom code. And what we try to do is we try to remove that problem. We try to say that one project can have two interfaces. So one is the no code, one is the high code. And basically you're the one who selects the one, because if you're at the early stage, you don't have engineers in the team and you don't have technical knowledge, you go with a no-code interface. You have lots of limitations and you accept that because that's the price you pay for the speed and for the budget you have. So you have more or less not very flexible solutions because that's no code, but that's good enough for MVP. And you can iterate on that. You can have maybe 10 iterations on the no-code space yet. And once something works, once you have users telling you, look, could you change that? That then you go back to the builder, you see you can't, but that's a good problem. Like now somebody said, change something, you can't change in the interface, but now you can move into the code interface and change anything you want there. And now you get the developer in, and probably now things are going well because once you have users, things go well, like by default, right? And then maybe you get some more money into the company, then you get, two people running the project, you get the no-coder and developer. So we think that we don't want to be taking the sides. We don't want to say like no code is not scalable, like all the high code gurus say, and we don't say the opposite, like no code is extremely difficult. We say that both are great for certain stages and certain problems. And it's never the case that one project is only complicated or only simple, right? Like anything you can find in the market has like bunch of things that are very simple, no code solves it, bunch of things that are very complicated. And we're just trying to target both and remove the dilemma of selection.
Let me summarize. For the non-technical founder, you're offering a no-code solution. Come in, start building. And we're going to talk about how that works in a moment. You have a solution for them. The difference is after the MVP is validated, let's say the founder raises some money, instead of having to go and now hire a team and build everything from scratch again, you can then evolve that no code into more, custom coding, a custom code solution. And your solution scales with the iterations and the stages and the needs of that team, which then helps the technical people say, we now have an operating environment or a development environment that scales with us where we can save lots of hours and time and don't have to hire all these people. Because I know so many founders that are paying astronomical prices for recruiting engineers that can't find talent. Like the talent war is real. You're saying you solved the entire spectrum of that, right from beginning to end. You want to be with the teams. You don't want to just give them a no-code solution and say, okay, then upgrade and hire your own team. You want to be with the startup for the entire lifetime of their journey. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exact.
Great. So I'm sold. Okay. In fact, I've been talking with your team there about our own development and different ideas here, which is fantastic. I love the concept of not having to then go and redo everything once we move past our MVP. I'm going to show this list. This was a list your team provided of your micro apps. Okay. And this was a fascinating concept for me in terms of micro apps. So these are all features or micro apps that are available to literally plug and play that you've got right there. Gift cards, e-commerce, ratings, calendars, all of these, like you've got clones. Like if I wanted to do something like with Uber, it's already there. And we know lots of companies offer sort of apps in a box where you can, download like a package, but then you have to set up your own servers and, do all this stuff. But it's all here. Web3, connect your wallet, NFT stuff, Netflix clone. This is very enticing in terms of, integrating Apple Pay, Google Pay, time zones, all this stuff, Airtable, Lighttable, etc. I was looking at it just kind of, I started to drool a little bit because these are all the toys that, I could potentially play with. Explain, how does the whole micro app thing work? What was in your mind in terms of creating micro apps? Like explain to founders out there the value of the way that you're approaching this with micro apps.
Yeah, so the idea of sharing code is not new, right? But what we see in the market is something that doesn't work the way we anticipated. Like if you look at the science, nobody creates a formula again. Like if somebody makes a formula in the mathematics or in physics, everybody else uses that formula. You don't have to make it again, right? And that's why we have very good progress there. But I think with software development, over the last 20 years, we got into a strange place where the code is barely reused. Like we have libraries in the world, but the libraries have two problems. One problem is that it's almost impossible to modify it because libraries are made in a very random way, built in a random way, so that it's impossible to come in, understand that, and modify it. Like you can, but it's very difficult. Like 100 developers, maybe one ever done it with one library, the rest never, right? That's one problem. The other problem is that who is building it? Like we can't build 100 or 500 micro apps or libraries because you need a lot of people. So you need people motivated. And then we have open source world. The problem with open source world is that it's a hobby. Like people have to do it in the evening, right? And then suddenly you get children and then, you move to other town and you just lose the interest for that open source thing. And then once there's a bug, like half of the world is crying and you're like, I'm not interested anymore. Nobody pays them, right? It's only donations. Maybe some of them make money because they're large, but most of them don't make money. Then we thought like, all right, so we have to solve it from that perspective, that people who build this micro apps have to be motivated. And then it has to be easy to modify micro apps built by others, because whatever micro app you're going to use, the chance that it's going to be 100% fit for your case is zero. You're going to be changing. We want you to change it because we want you to be innovative. Like the whole mission of Mars is create innovation, and the speed of innovation has to grow because of it, right? Because things go too slow. We think things go too slow. We think the progress is too slow. And suddenly here we say that, well, there is a huge market where a lot of talented developers just do this for a living. They're building the micro apps, and not like one developer building 10, but more like few developers building one micro app, and then every micro app is built by a team. So it's a proper business. So that's why it's it's sustainable. People do it quick. They fix bugs if they appear. They react on the support case, etc. And now we have like hundreds of micro apps. They are maintained by hundreds of developers. And then when you come as a project, you're basically coming with your unique idea, but your unique idea can be broken down into, let's say, 35 features, where 33 of the 35 features just fall into the category of one of the micro app we have. And it's not like you have to, you might build a better micro app than the one we have, because that one has been, built by a team that is building it for years. It's used by hundreds of projects. It's tested. It's like, it's really high quality, and it's being improved every day. So instead of doing it all from scratch, you basically pay somebody, or, depending on the micro app, if it's free or premium. But the idea is that every micro app has free and premium version. So you use the micro app, and then the rest you build yourself, but the rest is just maybe 10%, right? Maybe it's 5%. And then, the concern you might have as a builder saying that if I use a lot of building blocks, like in a no-code world, I end up by having a lot of things I can't change, and it looks like Frankenstein at the end. Like, the whole system looks like you really put things together that shouldn't be together. Well, here the idea is that start with that. If you have very little money, start with that things are put together without modification, and it works. And then you can just dig in and change things, and now it suddenly looks different, and now it looks unique. Now you took the micro app with a lot of thousands of hours developers put there, and you put some of your hours, and it becomes unique, just like in science. You take a lot of work of the others, you put something on top of that, and it's the new thing happened.
Let me try and describe how the metaphor, since I'm not technical, I'm not a coder. For me, how I saw it when you were explaining to me, and we've had conversations previous to this, was it's like vector graphics in a marketplace, like a photo marketplace. And let me explain, like vector graphics are different than pixel graphics. So if you went to a stock photo site, you download a stock photograph and you can size it and you kind of just use it as is. You might be able to crop it, change some colors, different things like that. But with vector graphics, you can, they give it to you. You can actually go in and manipulate the vectors, the little nodes, and change things around and use that as a base, but customize it completely to you. Then you can combine multiple ones, which I do all the time. If I need an element for an interface, I'll go download the vector graphics package and I'll switch up the colors and I'll customize it. But a lot of the heavy lifting has been done, and I come in for the final touches for integration, and then it becomes totally my own. So what you created is like the marketplace where you can download these micro apps, string them together. And if you're going to do like a Wizard of Oz MVP where everything's duct taped together and, it's janky, just to get you by and validate your idea, go for it. But later on, you can dive into the code and you can integrate, customize, and make your solution, your software integrated, cohesive, and out there that you don't have to rebuild or start from scratch. That's what I heard. How does that metaphor? I don't know if you're familiar with vector graphics and stock images, but that's how I see it. What do you think about that?
I think that was an amazing sample you brought in. I never thought about that, but while you were describing, I saw myself doing that. I do that exactly. When I work with vector, also with Figma, for example, you just get in the elements, you just change the stroke or the color, and suddenly it's yours, but you haven't built the whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. But there's one thing I would add there, which is like the micro apps can be used both with no code and with code. And that's the interesting part here, is that basically one micro app lives in both worlds, with no code and code world, which means that no coders can use it in a limited way, no coders can use it in unlimited way. And that's going to be amazing part of it, right? Like one thing, like, we not just went for an idea that micro app can be reused in the code, which is an amazing idea from the beginning, right? You already remove all the need for the extra code, but now you can use it both in no code and code, which is like now doubles the value of the code in the micro app now.
Yeah, that's so unique. You're addressing the weaknesses of both sides and what's happening in the marketplace. I think it's fascinating. Okay, so I'm hooked, I'm sold. Let's talk about some advice for founders. So I've got a founder out there. Let's just use a scenario. And they're like, I have an idea for an app. What advice would you give them? Whether they're going to use your platform or not, what advice would you give them in terms of their MVP journey? And then we can talk about how they might be using Mars. But give some advice based on your experience to founders as a startup founder.
I do that very often recently because we have a lot of people coming with exactly that question. Like we have MVP, but now what I see what's common in all those conversations is that people come with a lot of features in their head, like with too many. And I feel like I have to, do a very unpopular job of telling them, can we please not do that? Are you sure you need that? And then, it's easier for me because I've done quite a lot of different startups. It's been over 10 in B2B, B2C, and I always make that hack. I just use some of my experience where it's very similar to what they do. And I tell them, in that project, we did it this way, we didn't do that thing, and it was no problem. And then they trust me because, well, that's true, right? But it only works because I bring that, the other experience. But what I want is that now the founders actually understand that you have to do as little as possible, ideally nothing. So if you can do actually your MVP with doing nothing, that's impossible. But in theory, like try to go there. And for me, like if you take Mars, like Mars is a complicated platform. The first version of Mars, I've created in 2 weeks. So I coded it myself in 2 weeks. It could do very little thing. It could do like just one thing, but the whole thing was around that question, whether that thing is possible and whether that thing gives value. So the first thing I did there was that whether you could just bring an outside piece of code, put it there, and then the other code, and you can put it together in one project, right? Like that was kind of the first idea, and that was quite valuable. People liked it, but they said like a lot of other things are missing, a lot of problems there. But again, that thing that they really liked. But if I went to build everything, I would come back to them in a year, right? So like I talked to one founder last week. They're making an Uber for cleaning services, so for the laundry and etc. And they had the project, and they estimated that like for 6 months they get estimate from the dev shop, like it was 200,000 and things like that. And then even within Mars, you can do a lot of things quickly. But even in that case, I tell him, look, it's not good to start with a full product because then you have no idea what doesn't work if it doesn't work. Right? You have a lot of things, and how do you figure out what to do next if you have something that doesn't work? Right? If you have one thing, you just change that to the other thing, and you can compare. And we ended up having, this exercise where we were removing things, and there was only 3 features left out of the very long list, right? And actually, what was funny that those features didn't need the coding, so they ended up going and buying the bags for the laundry and just giving it to the people who need that, who subscribe for that kind of service, and then they would just send a message in the chat that it's full, and then somebody would pick that thing, wash it, and bring it back, right? And that's how they validate the idea, and it works. So they have sold 200 bags, and now they have quite a good traction on the bags. And now they do it all manually, but they see the traction. Now maybe investors will be interested, and etc. So my advice, basically, like in short words, try to do as little as possible. Like push it so hard that you end up doing almost nothing as a first run.
Okay. So much gold in what you just said. Amazing. And I appreciate that you even did in your own experience. So we teach founders the 50-50 rule. You should be spending half your time in development, shipping your product, and then half your time in distribution, validating your product. So you went and built something in 2 weeks, then you showed people and you got feedback instead of spending 1 year and then showing people and getting feedback, because you could have wasted, an entire year. So you are doing that process, and that's what we recommend as well. Even if it's your MVP is not functional at all, maybe a prototype, maybe a demo, maybe a video, a little pitch deck, something like that. In the case of this Uber for, laundry, dry cleaning, they didn't even have to build anything. It was just using what's already out there. They're ready to spend $200,000. And then, but they ended up validating and selling 200 bags. They make revenue, validating the market. It's a great story. Investors love hearing stuff like this, which is great. gives them even more confidence to give you money to build something because you already understand the issue. But let's get a little more detail. So let's say a founder comes and says, I've got this idea for app, 30 features, and you want to boil it down, push it to almost, do it nothing. How do you do that? Like I'm starting with 30 things that I want this to do. What's the process? Is it just talking, coaching? Like, how would you guide someone to go from 30 down to the one thing?
Well, from case to case, but there's another example I can give you. It's very interesting team. They're doing this hair, African hair, like those who can do that come to those who need it. And in Norway, for example, it's not very popular. So those who have that kind of need, they don't find a salon for that. So it's freelancers who do that. And in their list, they had quite a lot of features. And one of the features was that people could sell courses, like those who cut the hair could sell the course on how to cut hair. And I'm like, and they had a lot of features there like that. And I said, like, look, you have to really look at your feature list as a pyramid where everything sits on top of the main thing, right? You can't bring the course generating thing before you have all the people. It's not like people will come because of that. That's more like building on top of what works. But there's usually very few things that create initial traction, initial magnetism. And I said, like, in your case, you have to figure out what's that. And I just asked them, like, they have like long list, and I say, is this that? Like, if you start only this, imagine you launch only this feature, nothing else. Would it work? They're saying, like, no. And if you ask yourself about every feature, stand alone, like only this, nothing else, if it can be launched, and if the answer is no, probably do not launch it at the beginning, right? Launch only something what could be launched on its own. And then we ended up having like very short list, extremely, like, for example, there was a homepage, on the homepage, they had like maybe 15 tasks about, map, pin, filters, like a lot of things. And I'm like, now how many people are going to have there in the beginning? Maybe 10, like just list them. Like just plain list because it's 10, right? Like you can just scroll. They're like, true. Right? I think it's very often I see that founders make a mistake that it's almost like they came to the shop where everything is free and they have to grab as much as they can and leave, and they can't come back. And they're just, what if? But in fact, you can build things later, maybe if you need them, but start with only things that you couldn't launch without and things that could be launched on their own.
That's amazing. I've never heard it that way. Beautiful advice. I'm going to put it into my toolkit. When I work with founders, identify. So break down all your features and analyze and really ask yourself some tough questions. Can this feature be launched, on its own? Can we boil it down to the one thing and eliminate the rest that you're not going to need it for that stage? Like, and that's assuming that the founder has identified the problem, the target market, the underserved, need, the pain point, and figured out, okay, here's our value proposition, but what's the one feature that's going to get you there on its own? Prioritization is the key. I love it. Okay. So that's great advice. So I'm curious, what other things have you seen? Because you're working with founders, really all around the world, but you're focusing on, accelerating the startup community in Norway that I heard, and you're doing things in, different countries. What are some other mistakes you've seen and some other best practices that you would recommend for founders thinking about their MVP?
I think one of the mistakes I've seen, and it's also the best practice from the other hand, is that people are often afraid to copy. I think like you should not be afraid to copy, because it's not like somebody gonna gives you thumbs up just because you made it unique. And I think people take it quite wrong, the idea of uniqueness, because often on the pitch deck, you have to mention what's unique about your startup. And it's not like having a unique login window is important. It's actually the opposite, and a lot of things like that. So even when we built, we're the founders ourselves, and when we built like Mars, for example, 90% of it, we just look at what works in the world, what people love, we just copy it. We just copy it pixel to pixel, because we know works there, and then we believe those decisions on everything that's done there. And also because people like to see something they saw before, like people like to see this familiar things, like familiar buttons and login windows, etc. So that's one advice. Like, do not be afraid to copy, and actually, most of the things you should copy, and that's all right. Everybody's happy about that, your users and whoever who you copy it from. And then the other you know mistake I see is that people over exaggerate the importance of design at the beginning, like for MVPs, for example. We're all inspired very much by Steve Jobs and his obsession for design, but it's a different thing. Like the MVP stage is not the time when you should focus on design at all. You should focus on user experience. That's important, because if people don't understand what to do, they are lost. But they don't care about the fonts and icons. And often, if you try to please them with design, you do the opposite. You do something what's strange for them, right? So the mistake: do not focus a lot on design. And then recommendation: focus a lot on user experience rather than the design or the look and feel of it. And people, the interesting thing here is that I saw it often, even in my network, when I show something to my friends, when I show whatever, like a website or admin portal, the thing is that your friends often look at the look and feel, at how beautiful it is, because they don't want to think, because they're not your users, they're just your friends, and they look how if you show them the car, they look how beautiful the car is. They don't look at the engine, for example.
Sure.
And same here. So, and then often when you show to your friends, it's good and bad at the same time, and you should ignore the bad parts. So I always ignore all their remarks about how beautiful or ugly it looks. Usually things they say that it looks ugly, because I never focus on design. But then I ask them, but what about the task? Imagine you have to order the cleaning service, for example. Like, do you see how it's possible? And they're like, yeah, I can press that button. Great. So now I see that he understands that. So I think be careful, like the mistake, be careful on how you ask for feedback, because very often people give feedback that's not very representative, because they're a bit too lazy to look at the essence of your product and at the actual flow, and they just look at how it looks. And that's why when you do something beautiful, they say great, and you think it's great, you go and build it, and then you launch it, it doesn't work, right? So that's why ask people who are actually your possible users, and remind them that they should not focus on the beauty, but they should focus on the task, and give them the task. Tell them, like, well, you want to buy a movie ticket here, do it. And then you can just don't ask them like beautiful, ugly, just let them do this stuff. So that's like the three main pieces of advice I have. And they're like both mistakes and advices. Like, I don't think I have more of important stuff there.
I love it.
Three are the most important.
I love it, especially that last one. Not all feedback is equal, especially considering the source. And I know founders that, like, even talking with customers, they'll build something and they're in the validation stage, and they'll get one potential customer that happens to be a big customer, give them feedback, and they will, we need to do this. And they'll throw everything out, and then they'll rebuild the whole thing. And it's completely customized to that one customer. I call it elephant hunting. Don't do it. Like, stop and, figure out. So talk to your users, but be very shrewd and analytical about the feedback, where it's coming from, and the type of feedback. But you added the extra piece: teach them how to give you the feedback, which I think is, fantastic. My question to you: how should founders go and get people to give them feedback in the first place? A lot of founders are kind of scared. They don't know who to talk to, different things like that. How do they go reach that potential user audience, and how do they engage the how do they engage the feedback loop and get the right
Mm.
people in there, build that initial audience to test?
I think it depends on B2C versus B2B case. Like, for
Okay.
example, I was more in B2C in the beginning and then moved to B2B. And in B2C, like one of my projects was it was a movie app. Uh, it was the most popular movie app in Norway. So it was competing with IMDb and etc. And the way we were testing it is that we were just so obsessed about the whole problem we're solving. While the problem was not that big, like, but you have to be over obsessed about the problem because like there are very few big problems in the world. It's not enough for everyone. And most people are going to solve a problem which is not that big that people just get crazy about it. But you have to be, as a founder, you have to be crazy about it. And when you're crazy about it, usually people just get curious. Why are you so crazy about it? What have you built there? Show me. I want to see. So that's how I got feedback, and the whole loop started for the B2C app I had. I was just talking about that everywhere, on a party, on a birthday. People would often say, do not invite him. He's going to talk about his app. But at the same time, a lot of people have started trying it. And then, whenever people try your app after seeing you being crazy about it, they actually, end up by giving you good feedback and becoming somebody who is almost like paid to keep trying all your new versions. I don't know why, because I think they feel like certain connection because you were so crazy about it. And sometimes I see founders who are like not crazy enough about what they do because they're a bit shy. They think it looks maybe stupid. They think that if this whole thing fails, everybody will think that I've been, cheering crazy about something what didn't work. But I don't think anybody going to remember anything. Like, most people are going to just forget whatever you've done if that thing failed. So I would just encourage people to, be over crazy, over hyped about the thing you do, and then people are going to be curious and give you feedback. In B2B world, it's totally different. In B2B world, what I did is that because I knew that I will enter, for example, with Mars or before Mars, I had this cinema B2B software startup. And we just went to the places where the buyers are, right? And we were just trying to be interesting for them, look like experts in something. Because in business, we have to remember that everybody who is on the buyer side is interested in saving money. Because in the B2C world, usually things are even free. Like, the money is not that important. It's more about time. For the consumer, you have to save time. For the business, you have to save money, but often money is time as well. And then we were just trying to be so specifically, expert in certain areas that some people felt like they have to, be closer to us because we will help them in the competitive world against the other cinemas. So, and many of them didn't even know exactly what we did. So there it's kind of the opposite. You should not talk a lot about your product. You should talk a lot about your mission almost personally. You want to do that to the world, right? And then they will get curious about what do you do about that, and then you explain what exactly you do about that. Because if you start with a product, you're just in a big banner blind thing. Like, they just another guy selling me something.
Exactly. This is where we can take some advice from Steve Jobs, just observing him in the B2C aspect. One thing I've always noticed about him is he thought his stuff was the coolest. Like, he was always so excited about his own product. That was his whole Apple talks. And he just thought his stuff was so cool and it was so novel to him. It was infectious. So you're saying, be infectious, talk about the problem you want to solve, be passionate about it, generate that attention, and really you're kind of showing off your obsession with the problem, which is part of your domain expertise. Now with B2B, the domain expertise comes out in thought leadership and saying something and talking about, your expertise and them going and them saying, I always say line it up. You say saving money. I always say line it up with their strategic objectives, which typically is money, like being a for-profit organization. So that's how you get their attention, which is great. So two really great pieces of advice: B2C, B2B. I'm going to end with this question, as we're going to kind of push it a little bit. So for me, I see so many founders try and solve derivative problems, right? They're what I call 10% better solutions. They think they can solve a problem 10% better than the existing, competitor out there, which is fine if you're doing a small business and you want to do that, and it can be very lucrative. But then there are people who are thinking about category defining ideas, disruptive, crazy moonshot ideas, what have you. Based on all the startups that you've seen, been around helping, what do you think is the next thing? Let's go into the future. Like, is it metaverse? Is it AR? Is it VR? Is it sentient life? Is it, AI implanted in your brain? Are we going to Mars? Like, what do you think is the next big thing that founders now should be kind of tracking on as far as potential opportunities to do things differently? The world is always going to be filled with problems to solve, but what's the next trend? What do you think? What are you tracking on these days?
Well, I think it's a couple of answers here. So one is that I believe that somewhere far in the future, we will not move around, because moving around in the virtual world is very similar to moving around in the physical world. And I would never say that 4 years ago, but during the pandemic, we all moved to Zoom and we all moved to chats and things for work. And since then, I would never imagine that I could work with people for years, never seeing them. But now I work with people who I talk every day for many hours. We do things together. We whiteboard together. And if now we could work together in the actual room, I wouldn't go for it. It's more fun, but it's less productive. I find more productive. So I think our brain works in a way that we can easily get used to anything and think that's our brain will paint the rest. Now, I always give this example with 3D movies because I've been a lot in the movie startup industry. And one thing I noticed there is that if you go to 2D movie or 3D movie, the difference is only 5 minutes in the beginning. After 5 minutes, your brain has pretty much the same idea about what's happening on 2D and 3D.
Sure.
Actually, because for 2D movie, your brain makes it 3D actually. So you feel you're there. For 3D, it's there from the beginning. So it's easier for your brain to do that. But at the end, it's the same perception. So I think that's one thing I would put my bets on. But not exactly on the crypto part, but more on the metaverse itself, that we can easily live in the virtual world, and we already do that through the social media, etc. I see a lot of people doing that, but it could be more visual. But that's in 20 years maybe. But if you look at the short-term perspective, I like looking at what I do myself, and the reason I do that is because I believe that that's what's going to be very, very hot in the next 10 years, is everything what's about saving time for the businesses when they want to build something. For like the no code, the low code solutions are they're really hot these days. But everything else, what helps the governments become more digital, the business become more digital, and even the individuals become more digital. Everything what helps there is going to be more and more hot moving forward, because the generation is changing, and suddenly most of the people making decisions, they know the tech and they want the tech, right? And it feels like tech is everywhere, but in fact, it's almost nowhere. If you look at a lot of the areas like construction, government, and et cetera, in all the countries, and they need, like, I look at some estimates, like they have only 7% of software they need now. So it's like 93% left to build for them, right? And that's why, this no code movement is so big, because the people anticipate that that will be very, very important for the for the governments and others to utilize it. So these two things I would put my bets on. Everything about the virtual world, because the new generation is almost there already, and we are kind of entering it if we're not too conservative. And then everything what makes the product building simpler. It can be like what we do in Mars, where we do like the big thing, but it can be a little thing as well. Like some people do the landing page builders and things like that, like all like things like that.
So allowing organizations to digitalize and innovate, but they don't want to just buy something out of the box. Like, it's kind of like, the people who grew up. I didn't grow up. I'm believing that you're in the same spot. There was a time when I didn't have email, I didn't have internet, type thing, right? But the people who are digital, sort of natives, they not only are used to technology, they want to hack the technology. So they started customizing and everything. Now, what you're saying, I'm hearing, is organizations, governments, companies, they're going to want to build stuff. They're going to want to build it. And so if you can facilitate that, they don't want a solution that they're just going to, put in and install. They want to build something. And if you can help them with that, you're going to be a winner. That's what you see in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and even the shorter version of that is that we are basically on a journey where we're trying to shorten the time it takes to convert what we want to say to what happens, right? Like, the programming language and our verbal language, there is a gap between, right? And
Sure.
I think who shortens that gap and makes it easier to translate what I say to the digital product, they're going to be very successful in the future.
I saw a sci-fi clip. I forget which. It was Westworld, where someone was talking to an AI and said, "This story is going to start off with someone, standing in a field, and nah, she's not that old," and was just talking, and the computer was building it. And that's what you're talking about, shortening that from what's in our brains and what we can say to it becoming a reality. That's a big one. Okay, amazing. John, we could sit and talk, especially about the future and all the trends. We could talk about this for a very long time. I'd love to. I hope someday I get to meet you in person. I know we can do things digital, but it'd be really fun. I love what you're doing. Let's end with this. What's the invitation that you have for founders to contact you? What are you offering? Pitch it out there. And then I'm just going to include all your contact information, your website and everything like that, for founders to get a hold of you. What's your invitation? What would you like to say to end this?
We're launching publicly in August. So before August, we were in the beta and we were onboarding people one by one. So if anyone is interested in seeing what we actually do in details, I encourage people to book a call with me, and I'm so happy to talk to founders for half an hour. So I have a Tuesday open for founder talks. So, and the top button on our website, it leads to the booking page where you can book me on Tuesday. So just do that.
Amazing. And not only that, and I'm putting it out there, not only that, you also, I've heard you have a reputation for helping founders with strategy. You're not, like you just demonstrated on this call, you're not just telling them how to use your platform or demoing. You're going to help them with strategy, help them figure out their MVP, how to approach it. And if Mars is part of the solution, great. If not, you've at least given them some advice, and you're a founder's founder, which is what you're all about. That's what I hear.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So,
Okay.
The thing that makes me happy the most is to see founders doing things right, and then things work out. Like, whatever tools are used, and in some cases, I advise to use no tools, like in the case with this cleaning startup. Right?
Yeah, I love it. So we're definitely allies in all of this. We're fighting the same fight. I appreciate what you're doing, and once again, thanks for joining. And I look forward to more conversations like this in the future, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me.